EVO. This series contains adult language and depictions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to The Devil Within. This is episode 103, Redux, A Spellbound Palace, Part 2. And by the way, I hope you guys are enjoying the interview episodes that I've been dropping with the cast and crew from Let the Devil In on MGM+. I'm going to keep doing them as people make themselves available to me. So far, I've gotten a great response from everybody that I worked with. So I hope you're enjoying them. Let me know in the comments. Let me know on Instagram at The Devil Within Pod, or email me at info@evocreative.com. The first stories that were widely circulated and generally accepted regarding the strange happenings along Clinton Road began in the 1950s. By that time, post-war America had an economy that could afford and an industrial infrastructure that could produce automobiles for nearly every family that desired one. The urban sprawl of New York City had begun, and New Jersey was a comfortable place for families that worked in the city but lived in the country. Families, kids who would become teenagers who wanted freedom. And freedom was achieved behind the wheel of a car. And so, for the first time in over 30 years, Clinton Road had become frequently traveled. And so began the legend of the most haunted road in America. Anthony D'Annunzio was a 17-year-old high school kid who spent all his free time working on his 1939 Buick business coupe. The year was 1954. And although Anthony didn't know it at the time, he would go down in local history. It was a hot summer night, clear and humid, with the symphony of crickets and tree frogs filling the air. Anthony would later claim that he was just out for a drive so he could roll his windows down and get a breeze to try to cool off a little. A resident of nearby West Milford Township, he turned off the Hamburg Turnpike onto Clinton Road and was instantly pleased that the road was deserted and had long, straight stretches of asphalt interrupted by sporadic and dangerous hairpin turns. He also recalled two bridges that crossed a narrow stream, the ruins of a medieval castle, one pair of phantom headlights, and a monster in the woods. As Anthony D'Annunzio was enjoying the cool summer breeze through his greasy pompadour, he noticed far behind him a set of headlights cutting through the darkness. And they were gaining fast. Anthony sped up just for the fun of it. He'd been working on his car all summer and wanted to open her up a bit. He doubted he'd see the headlights again until he made the turnaround in Warwick and began heading back. But amazingly, his next glance in the rear view told him otherwise. The headlights weren't fading away. They were gaining even faster. Too fast for any vehicle he had ever seen or heard of. He could feel panic starting to take hold as the headlights charged after him. Less than 100 yards behind him now, with no sign of slowing down. Anthony had nowhere to go. Any more than a few feet off the paved road and he would be in thick forest. At his current speed, that was a death sentence. He couldn't go any faster, and if he slowed down at all, this maniac in the car behind him would slam into the back of his car, and that would be that. Then something happened that would live forever in local legend and send teenage thrill-seekers to Clinton Road for generations to come. The headlights that were chasing Anthony D'Annunzio's 39 Buick covered the final 100 yards between them in less than a second. Anthony was sure he was moments from death, and had he not had extensive experience behind the wheel, he very well could have been. The headlights, as stated, went from 100 yards back to right on his tail in a heartbeat. But they didn't stop there. The lights kept going, through his rear window, directly through the inside of his car, right past his face and out the windshield, where they hovered for a moment, then split in two and disappeared into the woods on either side of the road. This is where Anthony's driving experience saved his life. The moment he realized that he wasn't concentrating on the road, but instead on the incredible event that had just happened inside his own car, he realized that he was speeding right into one of the hairpin turns that Clinton Road is famous for. He was going too fast, nearly out of control, but he was able to stay calm and perform a controlled skid. he came to rest just off the main road on the edge of the forest. His car was still running, his own headlights cutting a penetrating light into the darkness of the woods. Anthony blinked. "What the hell is that?" is all he remembers thinking before finding first gear and getting out of there. If the phantom lights that tried to kill him weren't enough, then without a doubt, the thing that prevented Anthony from ever driving Clinton Road again was the monster he saw lurking in the woods immediately after. Half man and half deer. That's what Anthony D'Annunzio described seeing that night in the woods. And he made sure to explain it wasn't like a centaur, which has a clear biological distinction between what is beast and what is man. This was just a lot of both all over. 4 limbs like a man, but with hooves where feet and hands should have been, covered in fur. A face that was more human than deer, but with stubby antlers or, I don't know, maybe horns on top of the oddly shaped head. The only thing that wasn't completely clear in the recollection of Anthony that night is perhaps the most perplexing. As he was hurrying to get his car in gear and speed off, after seeing the creature in the woods, he gave a final glance over his shoulder and he saw the monster flee. Not to the left or right, not a retreat deeper into the forest, but up. He thinks he saw it fly away. Anthony D'Annunzio may have been the first teenager who came back from Clinton Road with a ghostly story to tell, but he certainly wouldn't be the last. So these Clinton Road stories, man, I'll tell you. Ask anyone my age or 5 years older or 5 years younger, that like kind of 10-year Gen X time span in Jefferson Township and, the surrounding townships. And everyone has a Clinton Road story where they drove out there with their friends on a Friday night and got the shit scared out of them. Now, how many of them went to Cross Castle and walked around the foundations and the ruins? I don't know. Because that was a higher level of balls that you needed to have to do that. And I'm not saying that it's dangerous. I'm just saying that in your minds, when you're driving out there and it's pitch darkness and everyone starts telling their own stories and their own experiences out there, and your mind starts going and the tension starts building and the dread starts building, by the time you get there, you're afraid to get out of the car. And I'm sure everyone listening or watching, there's something in their past, there's something in their childhood where the anticipation of danger and of fear and of ghost stories and of all this becomes so pronounced that it's almost paralyzing. That's what Clinton Road was to my friends in my generation in North Jersey. And we had all of these stories. The phantom headlights. Holy shit. Everybody has a story of the phantom headlights chasing them on Clinton Road. What is it? Every single time, it's just a car. Probably kids doing the same shit that we're doing. There's the story of the kid in the water, right, on the bridge, that everyone seems to talk about, but when you think about it, it doesn't really make sense because you're there at night and the water's dark and you can't see it. But the story goes that, you throw a penny off of this bridge into this little creek out on Clinton Road, and the penny gets thrown back to you from the water. And if you look and you see the reflection of a kid that drowned there like 100 years ago, something crazy. And everyone's like, oh, I'm totally going to do it. I'm going to throw the penny in. You get out there, and not only do you not throw the penny in off the bridge, you're afraid to get out of the car because you think something's going to grab you and drown you and drag you into the water, and you're going to become another Clinton Road legend. But to their credit, the production company sent a camera crew out there with my friend Aniki in tow. She's one of the producers of the show. She's terrific. I'm hoping to get an interview with her. And she mentioned that it was really scary and really dark. And there was something like equipment would fail or the headlights would go off or something spooked them out there. She was sure to tell me that, there was some Clinton Road weirdness that went on with the crew. Exactly how Tommy Sullivan got to Clinton Road is unknown, but nevertheless immaterial. The fact that he spent time there is what matters for our purposes. The drive from Tommy's house would take less than 15 minutes, but Tommy didn't have a license. And as evidenced by how quickly he crashed his father's car on the night of the murder, he didn't know how to drive. He could have ridden his bicycle there in under an hour, and all the neighborhood kids rode their bikes just about everywhere. The question remains as to whether he went there alone or with Lance, and if he was invited or not. It seems highly unlikely that he would have been an invited guest to the various rituals of the weekend worshippers. They were, more than anything, scared of being caught, or worse yet, exposed. So it stands to reason that Tommy went to the woods of Clinton Road and made his way to the empty shell of the once proud Cross Castle purely out of curiosity. However, he found something that he had never intended on finding. Something terrible and ancient and permanent. He was simply too young to realize what he had wrought, and it quickly became too late. It's doubtful he was even aware of what had happened, of what was happening to him. It is believed that Tommy only went to the grounds of the Cross Estate twice, each time in the middle of the night, each time with Lance. There's a police report of 2 underage kids in the back of a car, supposedly being driven by one of their older brothers. You'll remember that neither Tommy or Lance had an older brother. That report was dated just after Thanksgiving of 1987. Whether he was driven there or rode his bicycle is again immaterial. It should be noted that none of the persons of interest in the case who were of driving age ever admitted to driving Tommy to Clinton Road or anywhere else. Assuming that those 2 underage kids from the police report were Tommy and Lance, they must have seen enough to want to go back, because the second time it's believed that Tommy was there occurred just before Christmas, only 3 weeks later. That incident, as the local police called it, an incident, involved a disturbance in the woods near the ruins of Cross Castle. Apparently, there had been a small explosion caused by the improper use of various materials related to satanic worship. There had been a few high school-aged kids parked in a car nearby who witnessed the immediate aftermath and reported it to the police. Their statement was very strange. Between 10 and 12 adults, dressed in dark cloaks and masks, emerging from the woods, some still putting out fires on themselves and others. The witnesses, the high school kids in the car, were terrified at the sight, and they quietly drove off without the people who came out of the woods on fire knowing that they had been there. However, as these high school kids were leaving the site, getting back to the main road, they saw 2 boys, teenagers younger than they were, struggling to get away from the castle grounds. They drove right past them, but then the driver thought twice and wanted to help. By the time the driver of the car turned around to help them, the 2 boys had disappeared. One of the people in the car added that it appeared as though one of the young boys was assisting the other to walk. He was in fact nearly carrying the other boy. Assuming again that these 2 young boys were Tommy and Lance, we can surmise that whatever happened in the woods that night was the event that started Tommy on his path to murder. It was December 22nd. In just 17 days, Tommy would do the unthinkable. What could possibly have happened? So was Tommy Sullivan ever out of Clinton Road? You know, the debate is still open on that. Again, most of my sources were people my age who have an ever-evolving memory about what happened almost 40 years ago. Okay. What I can tell you personally is that in the weeks after the murder-suicide, when the rumor was that Tommy Sullivan was involved in a satanic cult that gathered and did their rituals at the ruins of Cross Castle out on Clinton Road, a few more intrepid souls decided to go out there and investigate. I was not one of those intrepid souls. However, I was in the car with a group of people that did decide to go out there. And I'll tell you how short-lived this mission was. You turn off of Route 23 onto Clinton Road, and it's instantly dark. You're instantly in the woods. Okay. You drive not very far, about 100 yards, and there's a 90-degree turn to the left with a guardrail. Okay. We're driving out there. Headlights go across that guardrail as we're turning left, and we just see spray painted, "We miss you, Tommy." Now, that made everybody shit their pants, and we turned around and we went back to the pool hall. Now, that's the extent of my personal evidence that Tommy Sullivan was involved with anything going on at Clinton Road. Is there a really good chance that that was someone just trolling everybody? Sure. Is there a chance that that was the satanic cult saying goodbye to Tommy? Less likely, but also possible. But hearing people tell me that there were police reports that had evidence of two teenage kids spotted out at Clinton Road while there was a disturbance in the woods that was attributed to satanic cult activity, that was just too juicy to leave out of the podcast as a possibility of what happened. So again, I'm a storyteller. I'm not a journalist. The people I was working with on the television show are journalists, so they have to, there's a higher standard for things that are going to be on national television with a major studio that is afraid to get sued. So, and you know what? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. It's less about we're afraid to get sued, and it's much more about the integrity of the storytelling. Okay. And that's true. And I completely accept that, and I am proud of the show. Very, very proud of the show. Because what I've said before and what I'll say again is that the podcast has happened. That story has been told. And I wanted the docuseries to be an elevated version, an evolution of the podcast. And they delivered, in my mind, very, very well. Richard Cross died in 1917. Construction on his impressive home had been completed just 2 years prior. But what transpired in those 2 short years would cement the reputation of Mr. Cross as well as his mysterious estate. As the army of carpenters and masons were packing their tools to leave the grounds of Bearfort, a select few were asked to remain to undertake an additional construction project. Winter was approaching, and so the ice harvest on nearby Lake Apacon would soon be underway. In the time before refrigeration in private homes was widespread, there was no more profound a display of wealth than to offer ice to your guests during the grueling humidity of a New Jersey summer. But that required an ice house. Ideally a subterranean structure, an ice house was used to store large blocks of ice, which were then packed in sawdust, and then more blocks of ice were stacked on and around the original blocks. Then more sawdust. This process was repeated, and the result would allow large quantities of ice to remain frozen and be enjoyed throughout the year. The ice house on the Cross grounds was dug out of a hillside near his private lake. The lake was a beautiful and placid body of water named Hank's Pond. The walls of the ice house were lined with stone, and it boasted a reinforced timber ceiling. The several-inch thick deep sawdust floor provided the ground-level insulation necessary to keep the ice adequately cool. An interesting feature of the ice house was its near invisibility. The craftsmen responsible for it used the natural materials of the hillside to adorn its facade and entryway, so it all but blended in with the surroundings. If you didn't know exactly where it was, chances are you'd never find it. It was a quiet, hidden sanctuary, tucked away within the larger, but equally quiet, hidden sanctuary of the Cross estate. It was from the workers who remained to build the ice house that we get the first strange stories about Mr. Cross. Those few men were witness to the gatherings in the grand ballroom on the first floor of the castle. Scores of guests in formal attire, live musical entertainment, the finest of gourmet foods, and since this was a full 3 years before Prohibition, Tennessee sour mash whiskey by the crate. It must have been an incredible sight, a who's who of the Northeastern elite, dancing and drinking and gorging themselves, awash in the light of hundreds of candles that mirrored the stars above, the stars that were long ago promised to the lady of the manor. A lovely scene, to be sure. Sadly, that was nowhere near the reality of these gatherings at Cross Castle. There is no direct evidence to confirm or even to suggest that Richard Cross was a Satanist. There were, however, several beliefs and customs that he brought with him from Europe. To use a broad term, he practiced paganism, which is simply the belief in and worship of many different gods. Not unlike the Native American tribes that once flourished in the area of the greater Delaware Valley and north into eastern Canada. They worshipped the god of the hunt, the god of the harvest, the sun and moon, the four seasons. Everything the Native Americans encountered in nature and couldn't fully explain, they attributed to a higher power. And they decided to hedge their bets, in case those capricious deities just might be listening to their pleas for mercy. Over the years, the practice of paganism has been vilified in the temples and churches and mosques of the great Abrahamic religions, and for obvious reasons. Paganism offers no revealed truth, no eternal reward, no need for absolution. It's all about the here and now. How you live determines how well you live. While the monotheistic faiths have a curiously negative opinion about sexual relations in general, and the female form in particular, paganism loudly celebrates both. Also, churches associated with the God of Abraham always seem to need money, with the collection of tithes being openly lobbied for, or more often, demanded. With paganism, money never enters the equation. On the surface, it just seems a lot more fun without any of the consequences. Plus, you get to wear costumes and maybe see people naked. The depth of your investigation into the practice of paganism will directly correspond to how freaky things can get. Much like Satanism, there are weekend warrior types who are just along for the ride, but there are also committed practitioners who hold sincere beliefs in things like astrology, alchemy, sorcery, and witchcraft. The deeper you get into paganism, the more overtly the beliefs begin to trespass on areas usually reserved for the occult and the paranormal. Mythical creatures, astral projection, interdimensional travel, demonic possession. Right, it's not just a Catholic thing. All the way up to and including the idea of ultimate communion with nature through the practice of human sacrifice. A lesser but still highly regarded method of communing with nature was the sexual congress between two or more, often many more, partners of any gender. So we have pleasures of the flesh combined with an active pursuit of phenomenon that lie at the extreme outer edge of human understanding. It's no wonder that the men who built the ice house at the Cross Estate had such incredible stories. So incredible that they were widely discredited and dismissed as the rumblings of former employees with an axe to grind. But again, what was so special about the woods of North Jersey? So if you're ever in the North Jersey area and you're interested in Clinton Castle, go during the day so you don't get scared. If you're on Route 23 in Jefferson Township, you're in West Milford Township at that point, put into your Google Maps Hanks Pond. Hanks Pond will take you right to that small body of water that used to be the lake that was a part of Bearfort. And just off to the left, you can see these massive stone foundations that still exist. And it's a really beautiful part of the country that you're going to see hikers, you're going to see people walking around. You'll probably see some no trespassing signs, or at least some no hunting signs. And I'll tell you to obey whatever signage you see out there. But at the same time, go check out the woods. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's also, there's a heaviness to it. And maybe that's just me and my baggage for that area. But I've been out there a couple times since the podcast, and you could feel it. So Hanks Pond, put that into your Google when you're on Route 23 in West Milford Township, and it'll bring you down Clinton Road, and you'll see what I'm talking about as soon as you're driving Clinton Road. Go during the day, like I said, but just imagine it at night, and you'll go, okay, this is probably terrifying at night. And it is. So that's going to wrap up A Spellbound Palace from Season 1. Hope you enjoyed these episodes. If you did, please share them with a friend. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And please follow us on Instagram at The Devil Within Pod. We also have an EVO Creative Instagram account that we'd love for you to follow. Until next time, stay safe out there. The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your writer and host, Branden Morgan.